The coffee cup shattered against the wall behind Amelia, not thrown with force but dropped a casual dismissal from David that felt heavier than violence. His eyes, cold and dismissive, never met hers. They skimmed over her, through her, as if she were a ghost. The acrid smell of burnt coffee and ceramic shards clung to the air, a fitting aroma for her crumbling aspirations. She stood frozen, her presentation clicker still clutched in hand. "Unimpressive, Amelia," he'd said, his tone flat, devoid of genuine feedback. The sting wasn't in the words, but in the casual cruelty, the effortless way he diminished her. Years of subtle slights, overlooked achievements, and the constant feeling of invisibility under the man who held her career in his hands. Every dismissal chipped away at her transforming quiet determination into something harder, colder. But what happens in the end will break every expectation you have. Amelia watched the shattered ceramic. A silent scream died in her throat. David had always been like this, dismissive, cold. She still remembered her first day 5 years ago. He was the golden boy of Sterling Innovations, the charismatic head of marketing, already tipped for the CEO position. Amelia, fresh out of business school, had joined as a junior analyst. She was eager, full of ideas. He had looked at her then, just like now, with that same detached gaze. "Welcome to the machine, Amelia," he'd said, a sarcastic smirk playing on his lips. "Don't break anything important." She'd tried to impress him, of course. She worked late, pored over data-perfected presentations. But every effort was met with indifference, or worse, a cutting remark. Once she'd meticulously prepared a quarterly report highlighting a potential market shift. She'd stayed up until 3 a.m. triple-checking every figure. When she presented it to him, he'd barely glanced at the slides. He'd picked up his phone, scrolled through it, then simply stated, "Interesting. Next." The memory was a dull ache. She'd learned quickly that competence wasn't what he valued. He valued power, control, and a certain ruthless ambition that Amelia, with her quiet integrity, simply didn't possess. Or so he thought. She picked up a piece of the broken mug. The edge was surprisingly sharp. A small thin line of red welled on her finger, a tiny wound mirroring the deeper cuts within. She didn't flinch. The pain was almost welcome, a tangible feeling amidst the emotional numbness. "Clean that up, Amelia." David's voice cut through her thoughts. He hadn't even looked back. He was already striding out of the conference room, his executive team trailing behind him like loyal hounds. She heard their muffled laughter from the hallway. His favorite joke, perhaps, about her lack of spark. A low hum of conversation started among the remaining junior staff. They avoided her eyes. No one offered to help. They were too afraid of David's wrath. Or perhaps they were just relieved it wasn't them. Amelia had seen it before, the silent complicity that festered in the corporate air, the way ambition could curdle empathy. She knelt, gathering the ceramic shards, each piece a fragment of her shattered confidence. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a burgeoning, unfamiliar emotion. It felt cold, sharp, like the ceramic in her palm. It was resentment, deep-seated and growing, flashback to a crisp autumn evening a few months prior. Amelia was the last one in the office. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting long shadows. She was struggling with a complex spreadsheet, trying to reconcile discrepancies that no one else had caught. David walked in. Ty loosened a triumphant grin on his face. "Still here, Amelia?" he'd asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Don't you have a life?" She'd mumbled something about finishing up. He'd chuckled. "You know, persistence is admirable, but sometimes it's just stubbornness. You need to know when to quit." He'd said it with an air of superiority, as if offering profound wisdom, but his eyes held a mockery she couldn't ignore. "Some people," he'd continued, stepping closer, "are just not cut out for this. It's a shark tank, Amelia. You're more of a goldfish." He'd walked away, then leaving her to the hum of the lights and the crushing weight of his words. She remembered the burning humiliation, the fight to hold back tears. That night, she hadn't slept. She had worked. She had solved the discrepancy. and she had submitted the corrected report anonymously, letting one of her male colleagues take the credit. It was a survival tactic, a silent retreat, but each retreat etched deeper lines of resolve. Back in the present, Amelia finished sweeping the shards into a dustpan. Her finger throbbed. She looked at the smudged coffee stain on the wall. It looked like a map, a dark, jagged continent isolated and alone. She felt a profound weariness, but beneath it something else stirred. A decision, cold and clear. She walked to her desk, her movements deliberate. Her cubicle was small, tucked away in a corner, a fitting metaphor for her position in the company. She opened a drawer and pulled out a small, worn notebook. Inside, she had meticulously documented every slight, every dismissive comment, every instance of David's casual cruelty. Not out of malice initially, but as a way to process the constant barrage. Now it felt like a tactical ledger. She opened her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing out her resignation letter. Simple, concise, no dramatics, no explanations, just a formal severing of ties. She attached it to an email addressed to HR with a copy to David's assistant. She didn't send it to him directly. He wasn't worth the direct interaction. She needed to preserve her last shred of dignity. Her colleague Marcus, a gentleman who often looked burdened by the corporate atmosphere, approached her cubicle hesitantly. He always seemed to be walking on eggshells. He was a few years older than Amelia, with a kind face etched with worry lines. He'd seen David's performance. "Amelia," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Are you all right?" She looked up, a faint smile touching her lips. "I'm fine, Marcus. Better than fine." He seemed surprised by her composure. That was uncalled for. He's been particularly aggressive lately. Don't take it to heart. "Oh, I'm not," Amelia replied, her voice steady. She leaned back in her chair, a strange lightness filling her. "In fact, I'm taking it quite personally, in the best possible way." Marcus frowned, clearly confused. He was one of the few who had ever offered a kind word, a quiet nod of commiseration. He had his own battles, she knew. He was often overlooked himself, despite his years of dedicated service. A good man trapped in a system that rewarded ruthlessness. "What do you mean?" he asked, his brow furrowed with concern. Amelia's gaze drifted to the now clean wall where the cup had shattered. "It means, Marcus, that sometimes a final push is exactly what you need, to realize that the game isn't worth playing on their terms. It's time to create my own rules." She paused, looking at him directly. "I've just resigned." Marcus's eyes widened. "What? But Sterling Innovations is everything. The opportunities, the connections." His voice trailed off, a mix of shock and a flicker of envy. He had often spoken of his own quiet desire for escape, a longing for something more. "There are other opportunities, Marcus," Amelia said, her voice soft but firm. "Better ones, where I'm valued, where I'm seen." She packed her few personal items into a small box, a framed photo of her dog, a potted succulent, a well-worn copy of a strategic management book. Each item felt like a piece of herself she was reclaiming. He watched her, a silent witness to her quiet rebellion. "What will you do?" Amelia closed the box, a sense of liberation washing over her. "I'm going to build something. Something David Sterling will fear." Her voice was low, almost a murmur, but laced with an iron resolve. Marcus simply nodded, a slow understanding dawning in his eyes. He saw it then. Not the broken woman, but the steel beneath. Amelia's departure from Sterling Innovations was a quiet affair. No fanfare, no farewell party. Just the hollow click of her office door closing for the last time. It was exactly as she'd envisioned, unseen, unheard, and utterly unremarkable to David. But for her, it was an emancipation. The first deep breath after years of suffocating under his disdain. She spent the next few months in a blur of focused activity. The small severance package from Sterling, combined with her carefully hoarded savings, gave her a modest runway. She rented a tiny, nondescript office in a shared co-working space, its windows overlooking a bustling street, a stark contrast to Sterling's sleek, silent high-rise. The air here vibrated with the energy of other ambitious, unknown individuals. She thrived in it. Her days were long, fueled by cheap coffee and an unwavering resolve. She immersed herself in market research, identifying neglected niches, overlooked consumer needs. Her mind, once stifled by David's narrow vision, now soared, connecting disparate ideas, spotting patterns others missed. The humiliation he'd inflicted had been a crucible. It hadn't broken her. It had forged her into something resilient. She remembered a particular evening late. The city lights twinkled outside her window. She was hunched over her laptop, analyzing data sets for a potential new venture in sustainable packaging. Her eyes burned, her fingers ached. A moment of doubt, fleeting but sharp, pricked at her. Was she truly capable of this, leaving the security of a corporate job, venturing into the unknown? David's voice, sneering, echoed in her mind. "You're more of a goldfish." But then another voice, softer but equally persistent, emerged. Her own. It reminded her of every late night, every dismissed idea, every time she had been overlooked. The anger, cold and steady, was a powerful motivator. It wasn't about proving him wrong, not entirely. It was about proving herself right. It was about building something that reflected her values, her vision, a silent monument to competence and quiet strength. Her initial focus was on supply chain optimization for eco-friendly products, a niche area often overlooked by larger corporations due to perceived low margins and complex logistics. But Amelia saw the potential. She saw the future. She pored over industry reports, attended obscure online webinars, and networked tirelessly with small-scale manufacturers and ethical suppliers. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to build connections. One early setback came in the form of a failed partnership with a small-scale textile company. Their values aligned, their product was innovative, but their production capabilities were unreliable. Amelia had invested a significant portion of her remaining capital into a pilot project, only to see it crumble due to missed deadlines and quality control issues. She'd felt a familiar wave of despair, the ghost of Sterling's failures haunting her. For a moment, she questioned everything. But this time there was no David to dismiss her, no colleagues to witness her struggle. It was just her. And she learned. She recalibrated. She developed stricter vetting processes, diversified her supplier base, and learned the art of tough negotiation. Each mistake became a lesson etched into her memory, strengthening her resolve. The sting of that initial failure sharpened her focus, making her even more meticulous. Meanwhile, back at Sterling Innovations, David Sterling was thriving, or so it seemed. He had indeed ascended to the CEO position his ambition finally realized. His office, a panoramic suite overlooking the entire city, was a testament to his ruthless climb. He held court in grand boardrooms, his pronouncements unchallenged, his ego inflated by the fawning sycophants who surrounded him. He'd never thought twice about Amelia. She was a footnote, an easily forgotten employee from his past. He focused on high-profile mergers and acquisitions, chasing market share with aggressive, often short-sighted strategies. He boasted about quarterly profits, about crushing competitors. His name appeared regularly in business journals, always accompanied by glowing profiles. The media portrayed him as a visionary, a titan of industry. He reveled in the spotlight, convinced of his own untouchable brilliance. He had consolidated his power, pushing out any remaining dissenters, including Marcus, who had quietly retired, disillusioned by the corporate culture. David, oblivious to the quiet revolution brewing elsewhere, was orchestrating a hostile takeover of a smaller, innovative tech firm. He saw them as a prime target, a quick win to boost Sterling's flagging stock prices. He was particularly focused on their AI-driven logistics platform, a technology he believed Sterling could easily absorb and monetize. His daily routine involved lavish lunches, golf games with influential investors, and late-night calls closing deals. He believed he was invincible. One afternoon, David was in a meeting with his executive team discussing the details of the tech firm acquisition. He leaned back in his plush leather chair, a self-satisfied smile on his face. "This will be a feather in our cap, gentlemen," he declared. Another jewel in the sterling crown. His chief financial officer, a portly man named Robert Davies, who had always seemed to sweat under pressure, cleared his throat. Sir, there's a rumor about a new player in the sustainable logistics sector, a startup. They've been making some waves. David waved a dismissive hand. Startups come and go, Robert. They're like gnats, annoying but easily swatted away. He hadn't bothered to learn their name. He didn't see them as a threat. Yes, sir, but they've been incredibly successful in securing major contracts, and their technology seems to be highly advanced. They're called Viridian Solutions. Robert adjusted his tie nervously. Viridian Solutions. The name meant nothing to David. He was too consumed by his own grand schemes. He hadn't connected the dots. He wouldn't have. He hadn't given Amelia a single thought in years. She was a forgotten ghost, a distant, unpleasant memory, if she was a memory at all. He saw only his reflection in the polished boardroom table, a reflection of unwavering success. But Amelia now, the quietly formidable CEO of Viridian Solutions, was meticulously building her empire. She operated with precision, patience, and a deep understanding of the market David had always dismissed. Her team, a diverse group of passionate experts, shared her vision. They were loyal, driven by purpose, not just profit. They were the opposite of Sterling's cutthroat culture. She had specifically avoided any public spotlight, any media interviews. She preferred to work in the shadows, letting her company's reputation speak for itself. Her name, Amelia Vance, was not widely known outside of the sustainable logistics sector. She had deliberately kept a low profile. Until now. The timing was crucial. She had been watching Sterling innovations, not with anger, but with a detached, analytical eye. She knew their vulnerabilities. David's over-leveraged acquisitions, his reliance on outdated technology, his penchant for grand, unsustainable projects. She knew the cracks in his empire because she had seen him build it brick by careless brick. Her final move, the one that would bring her face to face with David Sterling again, was imminent. She had been working on a particular strategy for months, a culmination of her quiet revenge. It was time to reveal her hand. The email landed in David Sterling's inbox with the quiet efficiency of a well-placed landmine. It was an invitation, formal and unassuming, to an emergency board meeting. The subject line read, "Urgent review of Sterling Innovations' strategic direction." His brow furrowed. Emergency meetings were rare, and the tone of this one felt off. It wasn't from his usual board secretary. It was from a new, unfamiliar email address bearing the logo of a global investment consortium, Ares Capital Partners. He clicked it open. The sender was listed as Amelia Vance, CEO, Viridian Solutions, and lead representative, Ares Capital Partners. David froze. Amelia Vance. The name felt like a phantom limb, an echo from a distant past. Amelia. His Amelia. The quiet, earnest analyst he'd dismissed, belittled, forgotten. A cold dread began to creep through him. How could she be the CEO of Viridian Solutions? And what was this Ares Capital Partners? He felt a prickle of unease, like a premonition. He stalked into the boardroom the next morning, his usual swagger slightly muted. The room was already buzzing. His senior executives were present, along with several unfamiliar faces. And then he saw her. She sat at the head of the long mahogany table in his usual seat. Her posture was erect, composed. Her dark hair was styled in a sleek professional bob, framing a face that was no longer meek or hesitant. Her eyes, once downcast, now held a sharp, unwavering gaze. They met his for a fraction of a second, and in them he saw not anger, but a cool, detached assessment. It was worse than anger. It was indifference. She wore a tailored charcoal suit that exuded quiet authority. A single elegant silver pin adorned her lapel. She looked formidable, unrecognizable. The goldfish had become a shark. The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. "Good morning, gentlemen," Amelia said, her voice clear and resonant, filling the room with an authority that stunned him. "And Mr. Sterling, thank you for attending on such short notice." David bristled. Amelia, he said, forcing a casual tone. This is unexpected. What exactly is this about? He tried to inject a hint of his old condescension into his voice, but it felt hollow even to his own ears. Amelia's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It's about the future of Sterling Innovations, Mr. Sterling. She gestured to the large screen behind her. A complex financial chart, overlaid with projections, appeared. Ares Capital Partners, of which Viridian Solutions is a significant portfolio company, has acquired a substantial minority stake in Sterling Innovations. A collective gasp went around the table. David felt a jolt of pure shock. A minority stake. How? When he had received no reports, no warnings, his chief financial officer, Robert Davies, looked pale sweat beading on his forehead. This was Robert's domain. He should have known. This acquisition, Amelia continued, her voice even, was made through a series of strategic open market purchases over the past 18 months. We now hold enough shares to warrant a significant voice in the company's direction. 18 months. She had been planning this for a year and a half. Quietly, methodically. While he was busy chasing fleeting mergers and basking in his own perceived glory, she had been laying the groundwork for his undoing. Our analysis, Amelia said, gesturing to the screen where more charts appeared, illustrating plummeting efficiency rates and ballooning operational costs, suggests that Sterling Innovations is currently on an unsustainable trajectory. Your recent acquisitions, while superficially impressive, have introduced significant liabilities and technological redundancies. Each word was a precise cut. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't accusing. She was simply stating facts backed by irrefutable data. David felt a growing sense of panic. This wasn't just a challenge, it was an indictment. This is outrageous, David finally roared, slamming his hand on the table. You're a startup, Amelia. You have no idea about the complexities of a global corporation like Sterling. Amelia's gaze remained steady. On the contrary, Mr. Sterling, Viridian Solutions specializes in global supply chain optimization and advanced AI-driven logistics. Areas, I might add, where Sterling Innovations has shown considerable neglect. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. We believe we can offer solutions to your current inefficiencies, solutions that will require significant restructuring. One of Sterling's long-standing board members, a grizzled veteran named Arthur Finch, cleared his throat. Ms. Vance, with all due respect, Sterling has been a market leader for decades. Our methods have proven effective. Effective for stagnation, perhaps, Amelia countered smoothly. The market has evolved, Mr. Finch. Consumers demand sustainable practices, efficient delivery, and ethical sourcing. Your current models, frankly, are obsolete. Viridian Solutions has proven this in the market. Our growth rates, which you are welcome to examine, far outpace Sterling's. She clicked a button and another slide appeared. It showed Viridian's exponential growth curve dwarfing Sterling's stagnant line. The irony was palpable. The company he had dismissed as a gnat was now a burgeoning titan. David's face was red with fury. He wanted to lash out to discredit her, to expose her as the goldfish he remembered. But the woman before him was not the same. She was armed with data, with confidence, with the backing of a powerful investment group. He was losing control. What is your proposal, then, Ms. Vance? Arthur Finch asked, his voice betraying a hint of reluctant respect. He was a pragmatist. He understood numbers. Our proposal is comprehensive, Amelia replied. We intend to implement a series of operational overhauls, divest non-performing assets, and integrate Viridian's proprietary AI into Sterling's logistics. This will naturally require a shift in leadership and strategic direction. The words hung in the air, a chilling pronouncement. A shift in leadership. It was a thinly veiled threat, a declaration of war. David finally found his voice again, though it cracked slightly. You can't just waltz in here and take over Sterling. I built this company. You built one version of it, Mr. Sterling. Amelia corrected her voice, devoid of emotion. But the world has moved on. Our investment in Sterling Innovations is not just financial, it is a commitment to ensuring its future relevance. And that future, we believe, does not align with your current leadership philosophy. She looked directly at him, then her gaze unwavering. We've already begun discussions with key stakeholders, including several of your own board members, Mr. Sterling. A collective ripple of murmurs went through the room. Betrayal. It was a calculated move, a public undermining of his authority. David felt the walls closing in. The silence stretched heavy with the weight of his unraveling power. He had underestimated her, severely. The goldfish had not only survived the shark tank, she was now poised to devour the sharks. The boardroom meeting ended in a tense stalemate. David, fuming, stormed out, leaving Amelia to field questions from the stunned executives. She answered each one with precise, unflappable composure. Her former colleagues, the ones who had silently watched his casual cruelty, now looked at her with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They saw not the meek analyst, but the architect of Sterling's potential downfall. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere at Sterling Innovations shifted dramatically. David, once the undisputed king, found his authority constantly challenged. Amelia, through Ari's capital partners, began to systematically dismantle his carefully constructed empire. Each strategic move was a direct counter to his past dismissals. She initiated an independent audit of Sterling's recent acquisitions, the very ones David had boasted about. The findings were damning. Overvalued assets, hidden liabilities, inflated projections. It all painted a picture of reckless management. Robert Davies, the CFO, bore the brunt of the board's anger, squirming under the intense scrutiny. Amelia, however, maintained a cool distance, merely presenting the facts. She wasn't seeking retribution, she was seeking accountability. One particularly tense encounter happened in the executive lounge. David, attempting to regain some semblance of control, approached Amelia directly. He tried a different tactic charm. A practiced, hollow smile was plastered on his face. "Amelia," he began, his voice surprisingly soft. "Look, I know things were complicated back then. I was tough on you. But it was to make you stronger, you know, to prepare you for the real world." Amelia turned slowly, a half-empty coffee cup in her hand. Her gaze was steady. "Is that what you call it? David, preparation?" He chuckled, a nervous sound. "Come on. We're both adults. We can move past this. Sterling could use your unique insights. Perhaps a consulting role, a substantial fee, of course." He was offering her a gilded cage, a way to reclaim control. Amelia's eyes narrowed slightly. "My insights are currently being applied to correcting Sterling's strategic missteps, David, and my fee will be the value I bring as a significant shareholder." Her voice was devoid of any warmth. "I am not interested in being a consultant to a failing model. I'm here to reshape it." He flinched. The mask of charm slipped. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Amelia. This is still my company, and I won't let some upstart tear it apart." "It's not your company anymore, David," she replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying immense weight. "It belongs to the shareholders, and they are increasingly aligning with Ari's capital partners' vision." She walked away, leaving him standing alone, his face a mask of impotent rage. David tried to rally his remaining loyalists. He called emergency meetings, delivered impassioned speeches about corporate raids and hostile takeovers, but the fear was palpable. Amelia's quiet efficiency had exposed his vulnerabilities, making his supporters doubt his leadership. The media, catching wind of the internal strife, began to publish articles questioning Sterling's financial stability and David's management style. The visionary was now being portrayed as an embattled, out-of-touch CEO. Marcus, Amelia's former colleague, was now retired, living a quiet life in the suburbs. He read the business news with keen interest. He recognized Amelia's name, saw her picture. A faint smile touched his lips. He remembered her words, "I'm going to build something. Something David Sterling will fear." He felt a quiet satisfaction. It was a vindication not just for Amelia, but for all those David had dismissed. One evening, Amelia received an anonymous email. It contained internal Sterling documents, highly confidential, detailing a series of questionable offshore transactions linked to David's personal accounts. It was an undeniable act of corporate malfeasance. She knew immediately who had sent it. It had to be Robert Davies. The CFO, desperate to save himself, was turning on his former master. The irony was bitter. David's own ruthlessness was now consuming him from within. Amelia considered her options. This was the final blow. It would undoubtedly ruin David, not just professionally, but personally. It was the ultimate revenge. But she paused. Was this truly what she wanted? To descend to his level, her transformation had been about building, not destroying. Yet the evidence was irrefutable, and it affected every shareholder, every employee at Sterling Innovations. Her responsibility was to the company, to its future. She decided to present the evidence to the independent audit committee, not the media. It was a strategic decision, not an emotional one. Let the system, the very one David had exploited, be his judge. It was cleaner, more precise. It removed her from the messy emotional entanglement of direct revenge, elevating her above him. The audit committee reviewed the documents in secret. The tension at Sterling Innovations was suffocating. Rumors swirled. Whispers of an impending leadership change filled the hallways. David grew increasingly agitated, his once polished demeanor cracking under the pressure. He snapped at his assistants, yelled at junior executives, and spent hours holed up in his office, frantically making calls, trying to understand how his empire was crumbling. One morning, the news broke. Not in a scandal sheet, but in a dry official press release from the Sterling Innovations Board. It announced the immediate resignation of David Sterling as CEO, citing differences in strategic vision. There was no mention of the illicit transactions, but the implication was clear enough: a swift, clinical decapitation. David, stripped of his power, was escorted out of the building. No farewells, no fanfare, just the silent, knowing glances of the employees he had once commanded. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. He looked years older. He saw Amelia in the lobby, standing by the main entrance, watching him. Their eyes met one last time. In her gaze, he saw no triumph, no gloating. Just a calm, almost pitying detachment. It was worse than any anger. It was the complete absence of emotion. He was beneath her notice now. He walked past her, his shoulders slumped. The man who had once shattered a coffee cup to assert his dominance was now utterly broken. His silence was deafening. He had always thrived on control, on crushing those who dared to defy him. But Amelia had never defied him openly. She had simply built a world where his rules no longer applied. David Sterling's exit from Sterling Innovations was a stark, unceremonious affair. The quiet hum of the executive floor felt different, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. He was gone. His tailored suits, his booming voice, his dismissive glares all vanished, leaving behind only the ghost of a once absolute power. Amelia watched him go, not with triumph, but with a sense of quiet closure. The debt was settled, not with explosive fanfare, but with the cool, precise hammer of corporate reality. She immediately convened a meeting with the remaining board members and key executives. The air was still thick with uncertainty, but also with a burgeoning sense of hope. Amelia stood at the head of the table, the seat David had always occupied, but her presence was different. She wasn't there to dominate, but to guide. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice calm and steady, "and ladies, the past few weeks have been tumultuous, but they have also presented us with an unprecedented opportunity, an opportunity to rebuild Sterling Innovations, to pivot towards a future that is not only profitable, but also sustainable and ethically sound." She laid out her vision. It was comprehensive. Strategic partnerships with eco-friendly manufacturers, a complete overhaul of the supply chain integrating Viridian's AI logistics, investment in renewable energy for their facilities, employee retraining programs. Her plan was a stark contrast to David's aggressive short-term strategies. It was about long-term growth, about value beyond the quarterly report. Marcus, her former colleague, reached out a few days later. He'd seen the news. "Amelia," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and pride, "I always knew you had it in you. But this is remarkable." "It's just common sense, Marcus," Amelia replied, a genuine smile in her voice. Building something that lasts requires more than just chasing the next big deal. It requires integrity. She offered him a consulting role, leveraging his deep institutional knowledge of Sterling's operations. Marcus, hesitant at first, eventually accepted. He found a renewed purpose in helping to dismantle the very system that had stifled him for so long. His arc from quiet resignation to active participation in the company's transformation was a subtle echo of Amelia's own journey. He discovered a sense of agency he thought he'd lost. He was no longer just an overlooked employee, but an integral part of rebuilding a broken legacy. Over the next year, Sterling Innovations underwent a profound transformation. The old, rigid hierarchies began to crumble. Collaboration replaced cutthroat competition. Amelia fostered a culture of innovation and transparency. She insisted on open communication, on valuing every employee's contribution. It was a slow, arduous process. There were moments of resistance, particularly from those who had benefited from David's old regime. But Amelia met these challenges with a quiet determination that proved more effective than any shouting match. She implemented a program she called Innovation Sparks, where employees could submit ideas for process improvements or new product lines. The best ideas received funding and dedicated teams. It was a stark contrast to David's era, where ideas outside his purview were routinely dismissed. She remembered her own discarded market analysis, the shattered coffee cup. Now every idea was given a fair hearing. This shift in culture gradually revitalized the workforce, injecting a sense of ownership and excitement. One day, while reviewing the financial reports, Amelia saw something that made her pause. Sterling's stock price had not only recovered, but it had begun a steady upward climb, surpassing its previous peak under David. More importantly, their sustainability initiatives were gaining international recognition. They were no longer just a corporation, they were becoming a leader in ethical business practices. She thought of David. He was now a ghost in the corporate world, his name rarely mentioned, his legacy eclipsed. He'd tried to launch a small consultancy firm after his ousting, but his reputation, once gilded, was now tarnished. The media, which had once praised him, now ignored him. The few articles that did appear spoke of his past failures, his reckless decision-making. His phone, once constantly ringing with offers and opportunities, was now largely silent. He was left with the cold, hard reality of his own undoing. He never regained a foothold in the corporate world he once dominated. Amelia, on the other hand, had quietly ascended. She wasn't seeking fame or public adoration. She simply wanted to build something substantial, something that mattered. The revenge, if one could call it that, was not in David's fall, but in her rise. It was in the quiet satisfaction of proving her own worth not to him, but to herself. The quiet girl he dismissed had not only survived, she had flourished, building an empire far more meaningful than his. She stood by the large window of her new office, no longer the small cubicle in the corner. This office was still not as grand as David's old panoramic suite, but it had a clear view of the city, vibrant and alive. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The hum of the city below was a symphony of progress, of constant motion. Amelia thought about the long journey, the quiet suffering, the relentless work. She had transformed the ash into fertile ground. The echoes of his dismissals no longer stung. They were simply reminders of how far she had come. The satisfaction wasn't in his fear, but in her freedom. The burden of his contempt had been lifted, replaced by the quiet strength of her own accomplishments. The ending wasn't about a grand, explosive victory, but a silent, undeniable reclaiming of her own power. She finally allowed herself a small, knowing smile. It wasn't a smile of malice, but of profound contentment. The cold shoulder he gave her had inadvertently forged her into the CEO he truly feared. Not because she sought to destroy him, but because she had built something undeniably better. She had proven that true power wasn't about dominance, but about enduring value. This story, like so many in life, reminds us that the quietest moments of dismissal can sometimes ignite the fiercest transformations. Have you ever found strength in unexpected slights? Share your thoughts below. If this tale resonated with you, consider liking this video, subscribing for more stories of quiet resilience, and turning on notifications so you don't miss our next chapter. Thanks for staying till the end.